Other than promotion, our hopes for this season were to get through it with no long-term injuries, so to get hit with one in just our third league game of the season is bad enough. But when it happens to arguably the key to our entire operation, you can't help but want to scream. Add in another 3 players on the same night, albeit smaller injuries, and it's definitely okay to add some swear words to that loud scream. With Alfie Kilgour out for the remainder of the season, we must move on. But does that journey involve another dip into the transfer market, or has Clough got enough in reserve to continue the push forward without reverting to the age-old Mansfield Town problem solver of square pegs in round holes? I'm sure that'll be tonight's main talking point, with the injury concerns still fresh on our mind, but we'll also find time to talk about the draw at Doncaster, the home win over Morecambe, the upcoming trip to the UK's worst seaside, and much more in between, including, as ever, your comments, questions and opinions in the live feed. You know what to do by now. This is the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast.
Hello, good evening and welcome to the Mansfield Matters Podcast, the show for the fans, by the fans. Why? Because Mansfield always matters. Thanks again for joining us. It's been a frustrating couple of days for Mansfield, really. The 2-2 draw at Doncaster was a good point, but I think we'd have taken a defeat if we could have held on to the 4 players that got injured. We'll talk all about that tonight. As always, come and have your say in the comments. Apologies that we're a little bit later starting tonight. We were supposed to have a third panellist, but tech gremlins sort of got in the way, and I've thrown a paddy, thrown some equipment out of the window, and now just waiting for the police to arrive to arrest me for a neighbourhood disturbance. But whilst I wait for the fuzz to knock on the door, Clive Parkin's going to keep me entertained. Evening, Clive.
Good evening, Craig.
Good to see you, as always. I think we should delve straight in, shouldn't we? We'll come to the comments in just a minute. As always, come and have your say on your team. Well, there's no other place to start, is there? But the devastating news, really, that Alfie Kilgour is going to be ruled out for not just the remainder of this season, but probably up to a year.
Yeah, you couldn't write this story, could you? I mean, our very best player of last season out for pretty much the season. I mean, he's due back February, but who knows? And obviously our head and shoulders best player this season, now gone for the rest of the season. It's very difficult to say anything other than that's intensely bad luck. However, I think some of the lesser injuries that are proliferating at the moment suggest to me poor conditioning. And I therefore would ask the question again, there's no answer to it, but what are they doing with a huge squad of technical trainers, coaches, fitness coaches? I don't know. They're turning out players that just snap at the slightest problem.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating one, isn't it? Because I've never known, and I said this numerous times last season, I've never known a squad or a management team had this much bad luck with injuries. And it does seem to be those little things, those groins, those hamstrings, those things which are unpreventable, but also I think probably are preventable at the same time. And it's not uncommon to have those injuries throughout the course of the season, but you have them in dribs and drabs, one here, one there. But to get, taking Alfie Kilgour aside out of the equation for a second, to have 3 of those style injuries in one night, just 3 games into the league season, is a real conundrum. It does make you think, how big does our squad actually need to be to cover all eventualities? The medical route, forget the Bishop Street stand and the redevelopment of adding things onto the training ground, as rumoured. I think it's the medical room that needs another extension, isn't it? It needs to be 3 stories now.
Well, now you know why they've applied for permission to extend the training facilities. They need another ward.
Yeah, it's not a new pitch, is it? It's another training. It's another medical room.
I mean, we're making light of this, but it is perplexing beyond belief, because I've never experienced in 128 years of watching the Stags, I've never experienced anything like this. I mean, perhaps these players are so fit, they're like a taut string. It doesn't take much to snap it. But that's then wrong of whoever's conditioning the players. They're either overfit or underfit, and I don't know the answer to that question. But I'll have to say that people like Boateng should not be having a sprain. He didn't even break sweat, never mind break anything else. And the only thing I would say is that just like when Hewitt got injured, he was playing out of position on his wrong leg. And likewise, Boateng, as we know, can only ever do anything with his left foot. And he was playing down the wrong side of the pitch. Now, if it's not natural, if your body geometry is not natural, and you go into certain situations, it's a bigger risk. That's me as an absolute expert on on body geometry.
I mean, to be fair, I think there's probably rhyme and reason in that, because if you think about it, sometimes I actually thought about this at Doncaster weirdly. I can't remember why I was thinking about it. It was probably to do with something else. But imagine all of a sudden waking up one day and everything that you know is different. So when you're driving to work, instead of driving forwards, you have to drive in reverse all the way down the motorway. Your cornering's different, all of that stuff, and you're just completely out of kilter. There is something to be said for that, to be fair. Boateng, though, it's one of those things. But the biggest blow is obviously Alfie Kilgour, and you really, really feel, because like Elliot Hewitt last year, immense player for us, really, really solid in that back four, and to lose a player of his calibre so early is a massive, massive blow. Not just to the way we set up and the way we play, but also to the team. You could see how shaken and how their minds drifted in that first half until they could get in at half time and see him. It's a massive, massive impact. Another captain has fallen.
Yeah, and we were building a team around the lad. That's the most worrying thing. At the end of the day, though, we came out in the second half and played some good football. And I think, we have players that can slot in there, but it just removes that level of cover that we've been trying desperately to put in place. I thought the lads who played in the back line after the injury did a decent enough job. But, we've got the guy from Cambridge, forgot his name.
George Williams.
George Williams is only a couple of weeks away from being match ready, I understand. So I dare say he'll be warming his bum on the bench over the next few games. And I think, Cargill's did a creditable job. And, all the things we say about square pegs and round holes, if you put Jordan Bowery somewhere, he'll always give you his best shot. And, generally speaking, he's a reliable chap.
Yeah. The thing for me is short-term fixtures versus long-term fixtures. We got through Tuesday night, and to be fair to the lads, in previous seasons, last season in particular, that scenario, losing a player of Alfie Kilgour's standing and then losing the other three through knocks and niggles, would have completely derailed us and would have walked away from that with absolutely nothing other than a defeat. So you've got to give credit to Clough and the lads for actually getting through that and taking a well-deserved point away. We probably, in argument's sake, could have had all three, but it's a point. We're still unbeaten. We're still up there, and we've got through it. The question now is how we move forward, because we can't, if we go into the next 3-4 games playing Lucas Akins at right back, we're not only playing another striker, another player out of position, but we're also losing it. I don't think you can even argue with this statement, a vital part of our attacking play. He's been fantastic up there, and as soon as you lose him from it, you lose the element of attack.
Yeah, I've been a big supporter of Lucas Akins. I've been one of those people that from the start have been saying to people who've been ridiculing him just to get real. The guy's contribution isn't always obvious. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
And certainly during the days of single cameras, it wasn't always obvious because you'd only saw the guy on the ball and not the fella who was dragging people around. And I think where we are now is we've got a batch of really good players, and I think injuries are going to happen. It's just this phenomenon of having 4 in one half. It really doesn't make any sense. It was Bradford all over again, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we've got McDonald back on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. And Quinny played, he played like a bloke half his age his final ball was poor, but that's just on the day. But if other players were as tough and as resolute as Quinny, we'd be all right. But I have to say, I think our midfield looks fabulous when they're on form. I mean, the goal we scored the other day was 28 passes, all but 2 of our team played passes in the move that resulted in a goal. I think we've got a team that on its day will beat anybody, and I think it's the squad is better than it was last year. Therefore, we can tolerate a few injuries, which you're going to get. What it can't tolerate very easily is the loss of its best players on long-term injuries, which is what we've now got.
It certainly is. Can't wait for a year's time when we've got Hewitt and Kilgour back fighting fit. Will be some defence then. But who else will come in and take that mantle? Because, of course, before Kilgour, it was Hewitt who had the mantle. Go on, sorry.
The window's still open, of course. So, I mean, there's nothing to stop the club either securing the signature of another defender or going for one on loan, just to give us that bit of cover. We're not desperate like we were 2 years ago, but we had the situation at Doncaster where we've got 2 strikers in defence. Again, we don't want to be doing that. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's come to some of your guys' comments. As always, keep them coming in the live feed and have your say on your team. Adams kicks us off tonight, who says tech injury list. He was supposed to be joining us, but the tech didn't quite work, so I've thrown stuff out the window. He also says all 4 Crocs in one match, deja vu again. Marie says, got to question the training regime. 3 muscle injuries in one night isn't bad luck. Sounds more like bad planning. Williams, how good? Asked Adam. Only realised he played at Matlock once I got home. Richard says we need to get a centre-back and a right-back on loan until January. Unfortunately, since Harbottle signed for Hibs, I don't have any suggestions at this time. The guys who played out of position at Donny did a decent job, and the squad is better than last year, but I wouldn't want to use those players regularly in those positions. Mark in the comments has put JJ O'Toole ? Now, there's an interesting one for me because I was thinking about this entire situation on the way home from Doncaster, and whilst it's frustrating on the surface because you've lost Johnson and Aaron Lewis, and let's for this particular part of the conversation talk just defensively here. Let's not talk about Lewis's role in midfield. Johnson is your first choice right back. Aaron Lewis is your second choice right back. You lose both in one. You lose both in one game. Who then comes in? Well, then you probably look at Jordan Bowery as your next option, or Lucas Akins. Well, let's say it's Jordan Bowery. Like Clive said, he can do a job pretty much anywhere and can be comfortable. But then players like George Williams, John Joe O'Toole, Cooper, George Cooper, the young defenders spring to mind. Ollie Clark, even as an option, when he played at centre-back for a little bit last year, was absolutely phenomenal. I think we've got enough central defensive cover options who can all do a good job. And I think what we're sort of a little bit worried about is plugging those gaps longer term, but not taking into consideration the likes of John Joe O'Toole 2 seasons ago, when the last time we played with a solid back 4, was absolutely immense. Didn't hit the ground running last season. We didn't play a back 4 when he played. If he can get fit, aka sort out whatever the bloody hell is clearly going on, and get back in the manager's plans, he'll be a good acquisition for us, and that frees up somebody else to move across. He can even possibly play right back. You look at George Williams, promotion winner. He's not played at higher levels for no reason. The only trouble is he's coming not quite ready. It's just getting him ready. I think we've got to get through the next 2 weeks, but I think he'll probably be back in the fold somewhere. So I'd probably argue that, yes, we do need to dive in and get another right-sided option just in case, but I actually think we've got enough quality without having to do what we did last season, which is square pegs round holes, because I think we've got round pegs for round holes waiting in the wings. It's just that time frame of them being ready there and us being there now. We just need to marry the two up. Does that make sense in a roundabout way?
Yeah. I mean, we're never going to have two for each position and some spares. We're always going to have to cobble together situations when the need arises. And that's Clough's point, I think. He always likes players that will play wherever he asks them to. And he's got that in Lucas Akins and Jordan Bowery, to just name two. And I think that's good. But what we would really want is a settled squad with settled positions, a good solid back four and keeper that know each other inside out. We were getting there, weren't we? We were getting there. And Kilgour was the hinge pin in all that. And unfortunately, we are now without him for a season. And without wanting to sound too overly pessimistic, I don't know the seriousness of his injury, but sometimes you never get back after those things. You know?
Yeah, that's
and I'm hoping it isn't going to be that scenario, because the lad's got plenty of playing left in him.
That's very true. I mean, I've just written down some of the options that we've got. I've obviously talked through a few of them. But then it sprung to mind that once Stephen McLaughlin's back, we've got Callum McDonald who can also play at centre back. we've got more options there. Like Paul says in the comments, you'll always get injuries. It's a contact sport, but we have players to cover, and we're in a better position than what we were last year. So I do think we're there. And I've also written down what I think will be close to the starting lineup on Saturday at Grimsby. Moving Bowery across to right back, McDonald comes back into left back, Flint and Cargill centre backs. Maris comes in for Lewis, Reed alongside Reed and Quinn, and then it's DKD, Akins and Oates up front. And on paper, that 11, other than Bowery at right back not being a natural right back, is actually a damn good side.
It is. I mean, even as we've said, we've lost some key players, and some of them, sadly, for long periods of time. The squad will tolerate that, and that's good news. That is the positive thing about the recruitment leading up to the start of this season. And somebody on the comments has just said, "Thank God for Flint, the arrival of Flint." Absolutely. I mean, that man is immense. He's probably only 90% ready, but he's playing really well, and he will be the person that has to take responsibility for keeping that back four together. Yeah,
he will step up to be a leader now.
And he'll get a share of headed goals, I think, as well. He's a mountain, isn't he? I mean, he's a fabulous player. And I think we're lucky to have him. And it was perhaps clairvoyant of the club to secure his signature when they did.
Yeah.
He's going to get a lot of play, isn't he? He's going to take a lot of the central defensive role. And I have no lack of confidence in him. I think he's a cracking player.
Exactly. I just don't think there's massive issues to worry. Nobody will agree with this whatsoever. But, if we were really, really, really in need and we couldn't get anybody in the transfer window, there's a certain Mr. Perch who's still training every day that we could put on as a player coach just to bolster those numbers. Because beyond Flint and Cargill as two centre-backs, without even writing Perch down as an option, I've got 5 options to cover naturally at centre-back. So it's not that bad. I think the real worry and the real, let's not worry, that's probably a little bit too dramatic. The real comfort blanket, I think, is just securing a little bit of cover on that right-hand side, just in case Callum Johnson can't get back to where he was, and just in case we can't get Aaron Lewis back.
I'd agree. I think that's the area we need to solid up a little bit. And I think that shouldn't be hugely problematic. There are more right-footed players out there than left-footed players, and therefore we should have a market pool a bit deeper than we might ordinarily have. So I think the club, with its dedicated recruitment team, should be on this one. I would imagine there were people that they thought about but didn't select last time we recruited, so there were still players out there with the files open on them. So if they really want to get somebody, they will do. It's a question of whether they, like we've just discussed, feel that perhaps the squad's in its present form is good enough and deep enough.
Yeah, it could
be. I tend to agree there's no need to panic, but another game where you lose 4 players in the first half, we can't tolerate that.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be a lot worse. It could be 2 weeks after the transfer window and loan window had closed, and we could only go after free agents. So it could be a lot worse. Ryan in the comments says, I'd argue we need to dive back into the market to play safe. We played players out of position such as Akins and Bowery last year, and I'd argue they've played far better this season when they've played close to their position than not. I do question if these injuries have something to do with the training methods. I think we're probably all agreed, aren't we, that it's got to be a right back option. I think we've got enough cover at centre back, like we've said. But the bigger question is, how do we approach it? Do we buy somebody in? Do we add another player permanently to the ranks, or do we get a loan in, a younger loan, somebody of the Riley Carbottle age and mould who can play right back, but on loan until January just to cover the numbers, bearing in mind that we've also got a natural right back who hasn't got the Football League experience, granted, but is also our player who's not on my list, in Taylor Anderson.
Yeah, and surely this is the season when we should be seeing bits of them, cameo roles anyway, regardless of any injury crisis that drives things differently. And I think, we've got probably 3 or 4, and I'm going to use the word loosely, junior players that are by rights ready to be given some first team experience. I think Abdullah deserves a throw-in under certain circumstances. He's prolific as a goal scorer. We don't know how good he would be at this level, but at some point in the right circumstances, he should be given pitch time. I know he came on for a few minutes the other day. That didn't really amount to a great deal, and the game was won by then. But I think it's going to be an interesting test for us because we're all getting a little bit carried away. I thought, me included, by the way, and we're thinking we got the squad from heaven and we were going to march our way through this league. I wasn't suggesting we'd win every game, but I didn't think we'd be conceding very many goals. Now, obviously, that was predicated on having our Kilgour available for 40 games a year, and that's not happening this year. So we just have to temper our expectations a little bit. But I still believe we've got the matching of any team in this league. I guess we've not seen many of them yet.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be a very, very different Grimsby that we play on Saturday than we played in the League Cup.
Yeah, it certainly will. We'll come on to those later on. I've just had a horrible thought flash in my mind that Will Swan was on the bench on Tuesday night, came on for 45 minutes. He could start and Nigel Clough could do his old tricks and research the centre-back is born.
I don't know. I think we're probably being over-cynical. But that's a defence mechanism, isn't it? We just don't know what to do with the circumstances we find ourselves in. We are just fans and observers of the whole thing, and the club don't tell you what they don't want you to know. And I just think, we have a large squad by comparison to any other league team at the moment, League Two team, and that's got to be good news when we have injuries. It's just how many we can tolerate. And as I said a few moments ago, it's not the fact we've got players injured; it's that they're very important players and they're out for a long time. Yeah, that's something you can't legislate for.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet Nigel Clough is absolutely kicking himself that he's let Anthony Hartigan go on loan, the season loan to Barnet. Oh no, wait. We still don't need him with Hiram Boateng even injured. We've still got enough. Good move for him, to be fair. I like Anthony Hartigan. I think he's a good player. Obviously, any player that carries a tag of specialist, I always add a little bit of pressure to. But been unlucky not to break into the squad. Had his 2 shoulder injuries, and a move back closer to home with Barnet. It's a good level for him. They'll be competing, and we can always call him back if we need to.
Yeah, he needs to play. And he wasn't going to get much playing at Mansfield with the squad we've got now. And to be fair, where I sit, in a bit of terracing I sit on, everybody takes the mickey out of Hartigan. But it's a bit more like ribaldry rather than nastiness, because we've just not seen enough of him to judge him, really.
Yeah.
Every time there's a free kick, we're saying, bloody hell, why haven't we got Hartigan for his free kick specialisms? I don't know whether he was recruited just as a free kick specialist. I mean, he was supposed to be a creative midfielder, but we never got to see him because of his injuries, and then he fell out of competitiveness.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Once you're out of it, football, it's a harsh truth, but football moves on because games come thick and fast, and you can't afford to dwell. And I think that's probably an important sentence to swing us back to what we were talking about. You cannot afford to dwell. We spent far too much time in previous seasons going, oh, well, if we didn't have this player injured, we didn't have that player injured. It almost became an excuse and a dark cloud which hung over us game after game after game. What we've got to say is, yeah, it's absolutely horrible that our best player defensively and our captain, our leader in Alfie Kilgour is out for the remainder of the season. But we can't change that now, just like I can't change the tech at the start of the show, just like I can't change what I ate for breakfast this morning, or the crap cup of tea that I made before we started out of a rush job. It's in the past. What you can do, though, is go, right, what have I got to work with? Right, next time, I'm going to leave the tea bag in longer and put less milk in. You learn on those decisions and you move on for the future. And that's what we need to do. We need to protect what we've got and make sure Alfie Kilgour mentally still feels involved with the club, and we look after him, which I'm sure the club will do through due diligence and all of that player care process. But ultimately, when it comes to 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, we as a club, as a fan base, as a group of players, as a management team, have to be ready to step over that white line and play Grimsby without going, oh, well, if we'd have had Kilgour, we wouldn't have conceded that goal.
Do people actually talk like that where you sit?
I don't know.
Can I just
actually, it's usually, get up in! That's an accurate representation, I think.
Anyway, I'd just like to apologise to our watchers and listeners for Craig's analogies again. The teabag analogy didn't really work at all.
I thought it was brewing nicely, but there you go.
You carry on thinking that. So I think where we're at now is we have some cover in the short term for the defensive line, and I think that's better than we've been for the last couple of seasons. So it's not quite as bad as it would have been. I think midfield, I want to see some of these players stepping up to the mark a bit now. We look a distinctively better team with Maris in it. He's got presence, and he's not frightened of having a shot. And he's a tough monkey, you know. Lewis, I see, has been a bit more svelte and a bit more not delicate, but if you like, more sophisticated. But he doesn't have that presence. He doesn't have that power that I think Maris can bring along. And likewise, I think Lewis Reed he's a small player, you know. So you do need somebody in the middle there with a bit of grunt.
Yeah.
But I think we're better off than we've been for a long time in that respect, because, you know, we looked at the loss of Lapsley. It's not really been a loss, has it? You know, and who else did we lose to Port Vale? Who was that?
Charlesley, wasn't it?
Charlesley. I was saddened when he went, but, you know, life goes on, doesn't it? We move on, and we've got what we've got. Still a big question mark over Boateng, I think, because he can be brilliant, but not very frequently.
Yeah, if he had a right foot, he'd be dangerous, wouldn't he? What was I going to say? I had something on the tip of my tongue about. Oh, yeah, that's it. Obviously, with all these, you know, this big squad and all these players, you know, people will think, well, given what happened on Tuesday with the injuries, the last thing we want is games. But actually, we do need games now, and I do wonder when this reserve league, which we've entered, is going to kick in, because you're looking at the likes of George Williams to step up. You're looking at potentially getting. All right, at the minute, this is where we're at because we've made no signings. John Joe O'Toole in to give you a little bit of additional cover. George Cooper, Taylor Anderson, Stephen McLaughlin as well. That's another name that I've not mentioned when he's back in a month or so, 2 months, whatever it may be. When does this reserve league kick in? Because the sooner we can get these players who need the minutes, the sooner they can have an impact on that first team selection in League Two and make what is already a strong squad stronger.
Yeah, I've not heard anything more about it. I was told that there was going to be this second string league, and I've been pleading for that for a long time, but I've not heard any more detail on that.
Yeah, we need to hopefully we get some details on that in the coming weeks. I'd imagine it would be sort of September time when it would kick off. There's significantly less games in that than what's in the league. It doesn't work like every single league team.
I don't think we could sustain a 46 game reserve league. We haven't. You'd need an even bigger squad for that. We couldn't do that.
The reality is it's going to be more like 10, 12 games if that, and they'll be sort of every 2-3 weeks. But when you throw in the Papa John's Trophy in there, you've got the Carabao Cup second round at Sheff Wednesday as well. We've got games coming up where we can get these players' fitness as well. But I think just having those reserve games in there will be a real.
I presume as well this league's going to be regionalised, so there won't be huge amounts of travelling to do.
Yeah, which isn't too bad. So it won't be just regionalised to teams in our division either. It'll be made up. There'll be some real tests in there, across all 4 divisions. We'll probably play the likes of Derby, Forest, Port Vale, Lincoln, etc., etc. All Rotherham, your Sheffield teams that aren't too far travel-wise, which is imperative, I think, for the players' legs and that, because when you do add in those travel factors, it does make a difference when you're picking up these muscle injuries and things as well. So that'll be interesting to find out a bit more information on that.
And I also think if they get this thing running, they'll be reasonably well attended by fans as well. As long as they don't overcharge for it.
Well, there's the other thing. I think I seem to remember when we were in the conference and we were in the reserve league, then I think it was the Central Reserve League. The majority of the games were played on Wednesday afternoons, so that's another thing. Obviously, to save on costings with floodlights, etc., a fair majority of them, because they were competitive but non-competitive, were also played behind closed doors, so didn't really allow fans in. I'd quite like to personally, obviously we'll talk more about it when we get more details from Nigel Clough in his press conferences, if he gets asked the questions. I'd quite like to see those become nighttime games or afternoon games where we can, early evening games that we can actually get to and watch those players that aren't playing in the first.
I mean, I understand the logic of playing in the afternoon to avoid switching the floodlights on, but when we move into the winter, that doesn't work either. You put the floodlights on at 2 o'clock, don't you?
Yeah.
So I think that horse has bolted. I think the logic has got to be: do they see it as a serious competition that would be enjoyed by spectators?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah. I'd hope so. I think there'll be a good amount of competitiveness in there. Let's go back to the here and now. Keep your comments coming in as always, like this one from George. Makes you appreciate what Quinn brings to the side. He very rarely gets injured, and the red mist every now and again. But quality and his quality, and he's always reliable. I said this at the end of last season. I said it at the end of the previous season when he was rumoured to be hanging up his boots. What are we going to do without Stephen Quinn?
Well, we should have been finding that out this season, shouldn't we? The original news, he was hanging his boots up at the end of last season. Yeah. But having said that, I mean, the lad's as good as he's been since he's been with the club. It's just the duration that you can't expect him to put in. And certainly if there's 2 games every week, he can't play 2 lots of 90s. Well, they're not 90s anymore, are they? They're at least 100 minutes long, the game. So he's half a player, but he's a really good half. And if every player played as well as he does consistently, we'd be better for it. But I mean, yes, somebody mentioned his disciplinary situation. Well, he has got a bit of the Irish red mist comes out every now and again, and you can see it coming as well. If he's not happy with the referee's decision, he doesn't let it go. And today, referees are not expected to tolerate that, and they won't. And he'll end up with more yellows for opening his mouth than for kicking people up in the air.
Yeah, hopefully he learns a lesson quick on that one. You never know. Michael says Maris and Clark will get you goals. I agree. When Ollie Clark's fit, Maris certainly will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how George Maris handles the old personal situation now, Clive, and handles sleep deprivation. Did you see his interview after Tuesday? He just went, "I'm just happy to be out of the house."
Listen, his work will be a blessed relief if he's anything like most dads. You can tolerate new babies for so long, but after a while you think, "Oh, well, going to work is the equivalent to going to the pub."
Yeah,
get out of the way. But I mean, I'm happy for that, like, because it's natural to be to be happy when babies come along, and I've been there myself, and the joy soon dissipates when you've had 3 or 4 missing nights of sleep, and but that's parenthood. It's the price you pay, and I think he's not the only player in our squad that's got family. So it's just one of those things you have to work through.
Yeah, same with Reece Oates later on in the season. We're going to have to contend with him potentially missing the odd game like Maris did in pre-season. When Oates misses, he's ready to go. Well,
she needs to be thoughtful about this and only have the baby when he gets one of his injuries.
Well, just don't trip him up over the umbilical cord. As ever, keep your comments coming in, and from all of us here at Mansfield Matters, a massive congratulations to George and his partner on the safe arrival of their new baby girl. Another question's come in about the ever-adaptable Mr. Bowery. I think it's a one-word answer. Do you think Bowery will ever play as a 9 again? The answer, simultaneously, we'll probably just say it contains 2 letters. No.
I know. I mean, in all fairness, I don't think many clubs play with a 9 anymore.
No.
Not
a traditional one anyway. I think it's a squad number. That's it.
Yeah, and I just think it is. Traditionally, it's a centre forward. Well, not many clubs have a centre forward anymore. It's just it's an old-fashioned. It's an anachronism of the past. I mean, we've had some centre forwards in our time as a football club. It's way before your time, so I'm not going to bore you with it. But the world's moved, and we now have a much more complex and sophisticated framework where the team's formats are concerned. So I think, wearing number 9 doesn't mean anything. And I just think the lad is perfectly adaptable. He's got strength. He's not the best player in the world, and I think he's at the wrong end of his career now. But that's a matter. If he puts himself, if he gives 100% on the pitch, that's all you can ask of him. And he always seems to do that. And he's got a mistake in him every game. Of course, that's the risk we take. Yeah,
but that's League Two. Every player has got a mistake in him at that point. That's the entire point. They're at this level for a reason.
Oh, absolutely. And Kilgour was much to blame for the goal we conceded the other day. It will happen. We've not mentioned Pim, have we?
Do we need to?
Well, I just want to repeat what I've said in previous programmes. He worries me. He really does. I don't think he's the best keeper in. Somebody said he's not the best keeper in League Two. I said he's not the best keeper at Mansfield.
I have to say I have not watched the second goal back yet, but there are a couple of occasions. I almost had an argument with somebody that was sat. I think they were sat on your row actually on Tuesday night about him, and then we quickly agreed on opinions. And that is, there was one particular moment where he had a go at Aidan Flint, and Flint has obviously played at a higher level and expects his goalkeeper to come out. I'm sick and tired of people saying, "Oh, the defenders should deal with that when it's in the 6-yard box." Even if it's in the 12-yard box, if it's in the box, that's a keeper's back garden. That's their territory to deal with it. And if Pim, for me, he sits sometimes in the back of his net rather than on his. He spends far too much time getting acquainted with that. Just come out and be a bit more commanding, I think.
Yeah, he needs to dominate more. And then when he's got the ball, he needs to distribute more quickly. And those are fairly big criticisms of a goalkeeper, if you think about it. As a shot stopper, I don't know whether he's good or not, because he doesn't get that many shots to save, does he?
Yeah.
I mean, the second goal, he could have parried that away more away from the potential danger area, and he didn't. But that's going to happen from time to time. And I don't think he had much of a chance with the first goal that was scored.
Yeah. Oh no! Who's saving that? That's just an incredible hit.
One of those every 5 years. If you're a footballer, I mean, it could have gone over the stand, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But it didn't. It moved. It dipped, and the keeper had very little time to react. So I'm not going to blame him for that one.
No.
I mean, I blame the defence because they didn't clear the ball. They had 2 chances to get rid of it and didn't do it. So, but as we've said, they're going to make mistakes, and it's how you deal with it.
Yeah. The Bowery argument is continuing in the comments. Adam says Bowery has become a utility player. Does he do enough for his wages? 2 recent mistakes. Simon replied with, Bowery was immense on Tuesday when he came on, and the reply to that from Adam was disagree. Cost second goal and a back pass faux pas the other week too. Not enough endeavour. I'm going to have to disagree with Mr. Crump on this one. I actually like Jordan Bowery. I think every team needs a Jordan Bowery. And I think he is wrongly judged for being this out-and-out striker because of that, what we were talking about 2 minutes ago. And that is the number that's on his back. People look at the number 9 and think, oh, out-and-out striker. Or what's he doing playing at centre-back? It's laughable when he comes on at centre-back or left-back or whatever. He's a player and he's an experienced player. And there's a reason that we have extended his contract. We've triggered options on him. And there's a reason he stayed at the club because he's a nice guy, he's a utility player, and he's the only player, when I asked the biscuit question, that considered having a cup of tea as an option. So Jordan Bowery, for me, captain.
Yeah, I think I share some of your views on Jordan. I think he's a player we can get value out of. But that's not to say he's a perfect player, and he isn't. And put him out of his natural position, he'll have more opportunity to make a mistake, and that's inevitable. But the numbers don't mean a bloody thing nowadays, does it? I mean, what's the natural position for 44? For God's sake!
Yeah, exactly. It's
back in my day, you knew what the number meant.
You were 1 to 11, and that was that.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We only had one sub as well.
Yeah, and then even then they might not play in goal. Yeah, it's a weird one. Adam says he'll take £1 for Jordan in January. I would be disappointed to see Jordan Bowery go, and I can't wait for him to get man of the match on Saturday. I mean, to be fair, Daddy's right in what he says in the comments. You can't keep giving players contracts because they're nice. True, but he can play football as well.
And I don't think you actually put that as a reason for signing contracts. You just have to.
Nice.
Yeah. I think the guy has got value at the moment. I think he's probably only got another good season in him anyway.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to tumble down into the lower down the pyramid to have his last thrash. But I mean, let's remind ourselves, he was a £500,000 player at one point, wasn't he? And he has got some talent. He's just, I just think I'd keep him on the payroll simply because of his versatility and his willingness.
Listen, I think if he was handed the gloves and started in goal on Saturday, I think we'd get behind him, and I think he'd do a decent job. I think he just throws himself into what he does. And to preempt Clive's next comment, well, they'd do a better job than Pim.
I was thinking that, but I would never have said it.
You would. Let's be honest. You really would. And to back up that, I don't know whether this stat is accurate or not, but in the comments, there's a comment which says, in the league this season, Pim has had 8 shots against him and conceded 4. Well, let's be kind-ish and discount one of them, those conceded, because no goalkeeper in the world is saving that pop shot from Doncaster for the first goal, are they? So, And
he did make a couple of saves in the second half against, the first half against Doncaster. That, whilst you might argue he should as a keeper, he did it well. I mean, he came out, smothered one, he parried one away. But it's those shots from a distance you don't expect to concede, and I guess he feels as bad about the one that went in as anybody does. But it wasn't his fault. I mean, if you get your glove on something that goes in, then you're as a keeper going to blame yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, and the big question is, there's 2 big questions really when it comes to Christy Pim, which I think we need to address and find out answers to. We're not going to, though, are we? Let's be honest. And that is he a nice guy? The Jordan Bowery method. And of course, more importantly for this podcast, what's his favourite biscuit?
I think his favourite biscuit is whatever Clough tells him it is.
And you can't argue with that, can you? Going back to the Bowery thing as well before we take a quick break, Richard says, Bowery's attitude and willingness to play in other positions should be admired. Yeah, absolutely. Can't disagree with that whatsoever. Keep your comments coming in. We're going to take a very, very brief break, and then we're going to talk all things Doncaster on the pitch in terms of performance, and look at that Morecambe game as well, and of course then turn our attentions elsewhere as we look ahead to a trip to the seaside on Saturday afternoon, as everybody gets ready to descend and fight over which is the best fish and chip restaurant in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, as they have fish, chips, mushy peas and dodge pavements paved with dog poo and more furniture in the garden than a furniture warehouse. Don't go anywhere. We're right back here on the show for the fans, by the fans. Why? Because Mansfield always matters. Welcome back to the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast. Keep your comments coming in. Right, we've talked all about injuries and missing players and muscle strains and whether or not Jordan Bowery likes digestive or a chocolate hobnob. Let's talk performance, Clive, because given the circumstances on Tuesday night, lesser teams and certainly teams of Ghosts of Mansfield past would have crumbled, but the reality is we came away with a solid point and something to build on. Unbeaten start to the season continues.
Yeah, we've got to keep reminding ourselves that we're not in we're not in a bad place, are we? We're third or fourth in the league at the moment. It doesn't mean a jot at this stage, but we are unbeaten. We have taken points from every game. You could argue we could have had wins at both Crewe and Doncaster, but equally, to pick up on your point, in previous seasons, with the scenario we had at Doncaster, and at Crewe for that matter, we'd have capitulated. We didn't do it this time. And we could have gone on and won the game, with a bit more luck. And if I'm being, I don't want it to sound like I'm moaning here, but I don't think we've had any luck at all this season so far. We've not had the rub of the green, have we?
No, we haven't. And I still think there's a lot more to come to us. I mean, I thought we played okay against Morecambe. I don't think we're at the levels that we were. I think it took us a good 25 minutes to get going, but it's once we hit our stride that we look dangerous. I just think we need to be a little bit. We just need to turn up the dial a little bit more earlier on in the game and really take hold. And I think getting that first away victory of the season, that's going to be key. We can do it at home. We know we can do it at home. Our fans expect us to do it at home. We've got to match what we did last season and do it on the road now. Although there's a lot to be said for winning your home games, drawing your away games. If you do that, you're going to have a successful season. So far, the averages say we're on course.
Yeah, and I also think that we are capable this season, as we were last season, of picking up a lot of success on our travels. Because teams play set up differently when they're at home. And we've exploited that quite well last year. Was it 12 wins we got on the road last year? So I think we need to recognise that's probably one of our core strengths. And if we can turn Phil Mill back into a bit of a fortress, we took our eye off the ball a little bit last year. It's not a complicated game, is it? As you say, win at home and draw away, or whatever the formula you choose to adopt. If you don't concede many goals, you're going to win more games. And I have to still say, if you get clean sheets, you never lose a game. Now, we've proved in the last couple of matches we can't keep a clean sheet. But those are phenomenons. And I think, sorry, I'll use the proper language, phenomena. You couldn't have expected what happened. And, the sending off at Crewe, timing of that, well, whether it was right or wrong, it's not really there. The timing of that turned the game.
Yeah.
And the injuries on Tuesday night at Doncaster had an impact on the game. We got over it, and we played very well, I thought, in the second half. So I think things will happen, and we might go into a home game fully expecting to win. We'll get turned over. That's how it works. You'll go to Bradford City not expecting to win, and you'll turn them over. Those are the things that happen at this level.
Yeah, and it's a long old season. There's still a long time to go, and I think you just focus on the positives. And that's that. Even with moving a few of those Jenga blocks around, we did okay on Tuesday night, and we got through it. The important thing is to not lose games and to get through it and to move on to the next.
I'll tell you what, Craig, we're making a lot of goal attempts, which is something we weren't doing as well last year.
Oh, don't get me started on XG. This is
I don't even know what XG is. Is it a pop group?
Well, it could well be for all it matters. So XG, for those who don't know, is a term which sort of first broke its way through when Football Manager did a bit of an update a couple of game versions ago. And it basically means expected goals. So it's some sort of mathematical bollocks calculation, which is to do with shots on target versus goals scored or some crap like that. But it means absolutely sod all. So we've got an XG of, we had an XG in a game of something like 3.5827 next door's cat's mother's brother or whatever. It means nothing because it doesn't actually get you a goal. The only expectation in terms of goals should be that you score one more than the other team.
And again, I'm a simplist. If you don't shoot, you don't score. And I think we're putting a lot more effort into making goal chances this year. If we could just turn it up a little bit, and I don't want to know about stats and XGs, we're going to take someone's pants down at some point this season, I think.
Yeah.
We're going to get a bag full from somebody. I'm surprised we haven't done it last season because at times we were playing such lovely football.
Yeah.
I think, notwithstanding the issues we've got, sooner or later, we're going to have 5 shots and score 4 goals, or we're going to get 8 shots and score 6 goals. It will happen. Yeah,
I completely agree. But none of that is down to XG or anything like that. It's a stat, but it's a stat which can be spun in a positive way, and anything that's spun positively, I'm all for. But also, you can also say that you can spin things negatively. Watch this. So we've had a comment in which says we've had 69 shots over 3 games, but we've scored what? 6 goals?
Yeah, so 1 in 10.
Yeah. So that for me is, I would argue that we've had 69, like a pessimist or a negative way of turning that stat would be saying 69 shots, 3 games, not scored enough goals. It's the way you spin things.
Another positive about stats is it keeps statisticians in a job. What would they do if we didn't have stats?
Exactly.
I mean, I got one of my pet grumbles, as you know, is the magnificence of coaching, training, and non-playing staff we seem to have. And we've got statisticians, we've got analysts, and coming out our ears seemingly, and an awful lot of emphasis now seems to be on this mapping of players during the game and turning that into statistics, and then how much percentile turnover there was in that part of the pitch, etc., etc. I've only just come to terms with assists. Don't make it any more complicated than it is. I was listening to I was watching a bit of the women's football, and the woman, I can't forget her name, that she was commenting, one of the pundits. She was rattling on about turnovers and assists and second ball conversions and all sorts of stuff. And I just thought, well, can we just watch the game? You know. You kick the ball in the goal, it's a goal. That's it.
I mean, you can. I mean, I can solve that issue for you, Clive. There's a little button on your remote control, 4 letters, mute. Just try that next time.
But it's not just the women's football. I don't want to hang myself on that. It's crept into the game at every level. And now you see these little panels pop up on your screen saying what the statistic was for this and that and the other.
Do you know, I find it fascinating that obviously, you know, everyone knows me, will know that I have this hankering to continue commentary, and I always look at other commentators and their preparations. Some commentators spend days on end putting together these big stat books over how many games they've played, how many minutes they've played, how many miles they've covered, and all of that. And I just used to look at who the manager was, who the top scorers was, and had a little look at how they played, because it's nice to have a stat in your back pocket, but sometimes you can prepare all of these stats and all of these lines, and you spend too much time trying to look big and clever getting those in, and you actually forget the point of the game. Anyway, let's move away from that tangent and go back to some of your guys' comments. Nobody wants to hear me have a mental breakdown, although you do it every week because you tune into this podcast. So there you go. Simon in the comments says, received positive comments from opposition managers getting a strong reputation. George adds, think we have had some good reviews from opposition managers, which is refreshing. All right, they possibly couldn't say anything else, but it's been a refreshing change, as it's good to see. Slight tangent, but enjoying the new rules. More ball in play, less time wasting, feigning injury, which will help us more with our flowing game. I have to agree with that, Clive. I've always thought that that's one thing you should do. That's always been a bugbear of mine watching football. Ball goes out of play and you spend so much time waiting to take a throw in. We saw it the other day at Doncaster. Ball went out on the right hand side. I think it was Akins who was playing up front at the time. Took the throw in and got on with it. And just that little bop, 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 that energy doesn't give the opposition time to reset and get back into position. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I've noticed people as soon as there's a free kick and there's no disciplinary action being taken by the referee, the player that's got the ball at his feet puts his hand on it, stops the ball and kicks it away, gets back into play. And I think that's good. But having said all that, the time wasting that this has been set up primarily to try and deal with should have been dealt with in a different way. Or anyway, the referee should have had the instructions from above to give no tolerance for people who wander down the line from throw-ins, people who take too long to take a throw-in, goalkeepers who stand and admire the ball for 25 seconds longer than it should be allowed. They've always had the cards in their pockets. They just haven't been, I guess they haven't been given the license by the referee's seniority to do those things. But as soon as you see a goalkeeper wasting time, book him. The second time, send him off. There's no question in my book. If you take a foul throw, instantly award it to the other side. Don't say, go back and take it from the right place. No, you've taken it in the wrong place. It's a foul throw. Just like if you don't throw the ball properly as the rules require you to do, it's a foul throw. You've lost the opportunity. Give it to the other side.
Yeah.
It's a rant, I know, but lots of the things that they've tried to conquer with this floating time clock now is things they could have been dealing with anyway.
Yeah. But I think it's given them a reason to deal with it, and I'm very much for that. I think it might peter out as the months go on. I think we might become frustrated with it in the winter months, but I think it suits our style, and I think we've adapted to it quite well. And there'll be other teams that haven't. The teams like Sutton United, just to pick one, who were very much, especially when they used to come to the one call, were very much time wasting, frustrating, run the clock down. That part of that game killed them off. They've got to find another way. And
yeah, but as I said earlier, I mean, I remember playing away at Crewe last year. We scored a winner in the time that was added on for a blatant time wasting by one of their players.
Yeah,
and that was proper justice, and it didn't need a change in the rules to do that. It was simply the referee said, "I'm allowing time for all this," and he did. Now the trouble is, not every referee does the same thing. So I guess this is a way of artificially putting regular standards in place. I don't know. I just think that there's a risk attached to this, because if you add 15 minutes to every game, which is more than likely in this situation we have, then players are going to work harder for longer. They're going to make tackles as they're tired at the end of the game. They're going to pick up injuries. They're going to pick up bookings because they'll miss time stuff. I think it will have to settle back a little bit.
Yeah, completely agree. Final comment before we move on to the best jingle in the world, and it's from Danny. It's a question. Do you think we'll regret letting Wallace go? Right, how long have we got? I think everyone knows my thoughts on this one. I was disappointed to see him go. I think regret's a strong word. I don't think we'll regret letting him go. I think we'll be maybe a little bit frustrated at letting him go because of the options he gave us. He was never the most mobile. He was never going to get up and down the pitch, but he would come in and do a job. And I think having him there as an extra option, I think would have been valuable to us to cover the eventualities of one or two players missing. But he's also a human being that's had a career and wants a career. And if you were him, you wouldn't want to be the player that might get a game if 7 players ahead of you all get injuries. You want to go and make a name for yourself and play. Simple.
It was the right move for the player.
Yeah.
At the time, it was probably the right move for the football club. All I would say is if it was this week, we wouldn't have let him go, would we?
No, not at all. He'd be guaranteed to be in the starting lineup on Saturday afternoon. Speaking of which, we need to move our attentions to that. So, jingle gods, play the jingle.
So will they win, lose or draw? And what will be the score? It's the guessing game that brings you 0 fame, but to be the best you must outguess the rest. So will they win, lose or draw? And what will be the score? In the League or Cup, you just make it up, because they're just works of fictions. It's podcast predictions. Will they win, lose or draw?
The much-awaited table will be coming your way on next week's podcast as we look to wrap up the first month of the season. But it is time to get your guesses in ahead of that Grimsby game. I think it'll be a more difficult game than what it was at one call in the Cup a few weeks ago. But Clive, how do you think it's going to play out?
I'm going to be very, very optimistic, and I'm going to say a 3-0 win.
And your man of the match?
Well, I would have said Alfie Kilgour automatically, of course, but I'm afraid I can't do that now. I want to go DKD.
Yeah, good choice. I am going to go for I think they've started to find their goal scoring now, and I think because of the whole Kilgour situation, I think it might take us a little bit of time to get in. I think we might go 1-0 down, but I think we're going to win 3-1. And I am going to put as my man of the match for Saturday afternoon, I'm going to put George Marrison. I think he's going to come straight into the starting lineup. I can't see him not doing. I think my 11, like I said earlier, will be Pim, Bowery right back, Flint Cargill centre back, McDonald back in at left back, Maris Reed Quinn as your midfield three, DKD in just behind Akins and Oates. One thing for me we can't do, I don't think we can play Akins at right back. We touched on it a little bit earlier on, but for me, he's a vital cog in our attack. I'm not slating him. I'm not saying he's a poor right back, but defensively he does lack it. I think Jordan Bowery's got a little bit more defensive nous about him than what Lucas Akins has, and Lucas Akins gives us a real good option down that right hand side. You saw a number of quality balls that he put in the other night. He's a threat. He's been a big hold up man this season. We need him up top. Simple. I
agree.
And that's it. We should probably leave it there. I don't think there's any more conversation to be had, other than to plug all things SSA and talk about what they've got coming up. So there are still limited seats, or they were as of Tuesday anyway.
Very good.
Go on. You got the number? I can't. Yeah. You've written it down. There you go. Yes. So they've got limited seats for the third coach to Grimsby. Please text or ring.
The telephone number is 07967 689 597.
To book your seat, please be patient and respect the SSA is run by volunteers as a labour of love, most of whom also work full-time jobs. And any abuse or disrespect of SSA volunteers will not be tolerated. There needs to be more comments in that sentence. Family-friendly SSA coaches, no alcohol allowed, in brackets, will depart One Call Stadium to Grimsby at 10:30 a.m, priced at £15 for SSA members and £30 for non-SSA members, payable in cash only on the day of travel. Please note, access to the SSA members' prices for Grimsby will strictly be on production of the 23-24 SSA membership card. New membership cards will be available before and on the day of travel from SSA for fully paid up members. SSA thanks all travellers and their new travel partners who haven't paid Mansfield Matters a penny, so don't get a mention. That number again, if you want to book, is
07967 689 597.
Yes, do book yourself on the coach. Have a great day. Make sure you pick your best fish and chip shop. Clive, what's your recommendation?
Well, I'm no authority, but Alan Wilson, who we defer to in these matters, believes sincerely that the one on the pier is the one to go to. So that's where we'll be dropping off the coach, I'm pretty sure, for those that want to. Grab some fish and chips and then meander down to the ground from Cleethorpes. If the weather's like it's been today, it'd be great. Just on the subject of no alcohol, I think that makes absolute sense. And it was pointed out to travellers at the last away game that the driver runs the risk of losing his licence if he knowingly allows people to drink alcohol or even to take alcohol onto the coach. So it's quite an important one to them. I personally would add into the no alcohol rule, no fish paste sandwiches rule as well, because somebody close to me on the other day was eating fish paste sandwiches and the place stunk out.
Yeah, so I can assure you it wasn't me and it did stink. And I think the same would go for eggs and onion. That's just personal preference, but there you go.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Yeah, I also agree on the no alcohol thing. The SSA do a tremendous job in organising coaches and getting everybody coordinated and safely to the game, and always look after their patrons who are on the coach. The small minority, and it is a small minority, and they will know who they are, who bring alcohol on the bus brazenly in terms of cans or whatever, or sneakily in bottles of water or lemonade disguised as vodka or as water, or Coke with a bit of Bacardi or whatever. Don't do it. If you're happy to put somebody else's livelihood at risk and ruin it for everybody else, then shame on you. And you are the type of people that, you know, if you can't spend an hour or two on a coach without having a drink, Google some meetings because you might need it. This pub's near a ground. Simple.
I mean, there are coach companies that will take people who have a very obvious interest in drinking, which is fine.
They shouldn't though. Even those.
No, but what I'm saying is they will build in a pub stop on the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The SSA doesn't do.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a drinker, so I'm not self-righteous about this, but I do think that some of the things we see, because we go to every away game, I go to every away game, is that fans turn up after kick-off, and it's clear that the most important thing to them was drinking, not the football. And they're the ones that tend to be the focus of the attention of the stewards and the police, and give our club a bit of a bad name at times.
Yeah.
I'd actually have a rule at all football grounds that no one should be allowed in after 5 minutes before kick-off.
As soon as that hooter goes off for the teams to come into the tunnel, lock the turnstiles, shut the concourse.
It's probably a bit unfair on somebody who's desperately trying to get up the motorway, but there you go.
Leave earlier, simple as. Right, that's it. That's my little rant for today done. Thanks so much for sticking with us. Apologies about the technical issues, which meant a later start. Today, I will go into the garden and retrieve all the audio equipment, put it back together. And if all else fails, remember the golden rule in Mansfield Matters: blame Cam. We'll see you next time. Let's hope the Stags can continue their winning run at Grimsby and look ahead to another week. And who knows, maybe they might bring an extra face through the door to replace Alfie Kilgour, who's out for the rest of the season. Get well soon, Alfie. And remember, if those bricks do come flying at you, still head them to the left or to the right.
I wonder if Narty's still available.
Hello? Yeah. Is that the mental asylum? Yeah. Someone's, Clive Parkin, he lives in Edwinstowe. Yeah. Okay, yeah. That's one. Thanks, guys.
Well, that's all we've got time for on tonight's Mansfield Matters podcast. My thanks, as ever, to the Mansfield Matters podcast panel and to you guys at home for getting involved with your comments, questions and opinions. Make sure you continue the conversation over on social media or at MTFC Matters. Go and search for us and you'll find us. And of course, don't forget to get involved in podcast predictions. The Stags head for Grimsby on Saturday afternoon, and the link that you need to play along is in the description right now. Right. We'll be back next week as we reflect on Grimsby and look ahead to another busy week for the Stags, where hopefully Nigel Clough has added another defender to the ranks and just alleviated all those fears of square pegs in round holes. Whatever happens, the football season is like a game of Jenga. Sometimes you put the pieces in the wrong places and you worry about the whole thing coming tumbling down. But with a little bit of tactical nous and a little bit of calm and patience, you get that piece in the right place and you can continue to build that tower all the way to the top. We'll see you next time on the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters podcast. Goodbye.